Dylan Mulvaney, the controversial, infamous trans internet personality, has been cast in the Broadway musical 6 as Anne Boleyn, one of the wives of King Henry VIII. So, is this another L for women, and yet another man who says he's a woman taking the spot that is exclusively meant to be for females? Or is Dylan deserving of the job, and are we all just overreacting? Let's talk about it. Over the weekend, Six the Musical posted on their Instagram that Dylan Mulvaney would be starring as the role of Anne Boleyn. They said, "Losing our heads to introduce your newest Anne Boleyn. Show some royal love to Queen Dylan Mulvaney, who will be joining the 6 Broadway 5.0 cast as Anne Boleyn starting February 16th. You're going to want to get your tickets, guys, and I wish I could go. Sadly, I live in London, so chances are I'm probably not going to get to see Dylan's debut. For those of you who don't know what 6 is, this is a musical which reimagines Henry VIII's 6 wives as a modern pop girl group, reclaiming their identities through high-energy musical numbers. Now, my background is from musical theatre myself, so I'm pretty keyed into what this musical is about. And to be honest, I've not gone to see it in London purely because I've seen so many videos of this online. There are bootlegs everywhere. And if you know the soundtrack, the musical is basically just them singing the songs. There isn't really much of a storyline. But overall, I do like some of the songs. I think it would be an entertaining night out. And it is a fun reimagination of the story of King Henry VIII's wives, and does have some tunes that I like, to be fair. So have you seen it? Let me know. As I said, Dylan will be playing King Henry VIII's second wife, who had her head chopped off. I know, wishful thinking, right? This character wears a beautiful green dress and is known for singing the song Don't Lose Your Head, all about getting your head chopped off. And unfortunately, in the US, they decided to do it all in American accents. In my opinion, it works way better in the UK with English accents, seeing as they're playing English royalty. And this song in particular, I think, sounds way better in that way. So I'm team GB on this one. Anne Boleyn was known for her ambition and drive, and unfortunately was beheaded for treason in the end. But he worked his way through 8 wives in total, and you probably know the rhyme: divorced, beheaded, died, divorced, beheaded, survived. That's how you remember it. So if for some strange reason you still don't know who Dylan Mulvaney is, even though he's in our face all the time, I'll give you a bit of background. Well, Dylan really blew up on the scene due to his infamous series, Days of Girlhood on TikTok.
Day 1 of being a girl, and I have already cried 3 times. I wrote a scathing email that I did not send. I ordered dresses online that I couldn't afford. And then when someone asked me how I was, I said, I'm fine, when I wasn't fine. How'd I do, ladies? Good?
In which he documented his transition from being a man into a woman. Like a video diary most days, he documented stereotypical female things like shopping for dresses, like being afraid of spiders. And it seemed like with every video he posted, he just got more and more viral.
Normalize the bulge. We are normalizing the bulge.
Now, people were very polarized and in disagreement about this, of course. Some women found this deeply offensive, thinking he was just reducing womanhood down to a series of stereotypes.
Hey guys, it's day 4 of being a girl.
And he would often refer to himself as a bimbo, so I have to say I'm within that camp. But the problem is, to me, it was entirely inauthentic because Dylan has a history of trying to be famous. I mean, he was a they/them before this happened, was making videos about being non-binary.
I'm Dylan. Today is my birthday and I'm throwing a gender reveal party. And no, I'm not pregnant. It's for myself. I'm non-binary. I'm dropping the he, and my new pronouns are they, them, theirs.
And he wasn't really blowing up in that way. But this outrage, I think, sparked a lot of motivation for him to continue. And I am skeptical on whether that first video of his was actually just a joke. And because he loved the attention so much, he just kept going and going and going until it was his entire personality and he had become the woman that apparently he always was inside. The liberal media and the LGBTQIA mob, of course, loved Dylan. He could do no wrong because he's a trans woman and he's just a vulnerable woman trying to find his way. And in my opinion, this just showed how much LGBTQIA people can get away with these days. There's a lot of narcissism in our media personalities, in lots of gay men too, where they can flaunt anything they want. They wear anything they want, they get loads of praise, and it's difficult to criticize them without them accusing you of transphobia, homophobia, all the usual jargon, right? And so ridiculous was Dylan's ascent that in the first year of his journey to girlhood, remember, he called it girlhood, not womanhood, which was very, very strange. But during this year, he got invited to all places but the White House to meet Joe Biden and talk about why children should be chemically castrated and take puberty blockers so they can live as the opposite sex.
Mr. President, this is my 221st day of publicly transitioning.
God love you.
Do you think states should have a right to ban gender-affirming health care?
I don't think any state or anybody should have the right to do that.
So in my opinion, history is not going to look very kind on Dylan Mulvaney for that reason. And if that wasn't enough, Dylan became even more controversial when he released his music video, Days of Girlhood, in which he flounced around like a little bimbo doing the walk of shame after sleeping with a guy, singing with lyrics about how he was going to pick up his meds, and again, just simply reducing women down to a set of stereotypes. But once again, the progressives ate this up. He had lots of women in his music video. He has a huge army of women, female women, supporting him online.
Dylan Mulvaney's Days of Girlhood isn't the problem. You are.
So this is very divided. But like all these things, in my opinion, these voices are the loudest, they're the ones we hear the most. They have a complete dominance over Hollywood and music industry. And it is hard to gauge, well, what do the public really think of this grifter and stunt act, Dylan Mulvaney? And one reference point we might use to try and work out, is this Broadway debut going to be a success or flop, was Dylan's advertising campaign with Bud Light, in which he wore a dress, holding cans of Bud Light. He even got in the bath with some bubbles, I think. And this actually really backfired. In fact, there was a massive boycott over buying Bud Light in America, and they lost 10% of sales that spring. So the general public in that way was not buying Dylan Mulvaney's facade. But I think we can assume that the audience and the market for Bud Light is going to be quite different to those coming to watch a musical and have a fun night on Broadway. So are we going to see a similar result? And despite the backlash, Dylan continued to be protected by the liberal media, by the trans mob, saying this was just all transphobia, even though I think a lot of it was down to just how obscenely cringe and insulting Dylan Mulvaney is. They could have got some other trans personality who may not have had as much of a backfire, but they had to choose, of all people, Dylan Mulvaney. And with the history of Dylan's grifts, one wonders, is he even going to be talented enough to play this role? In fact, these roles are difficult sings. You need 6 belty-ass girls who can sing their asses off, sing all sorts of different notes, sing songs in all sorts of different styles. You even have a few cast as swings and they cover every single role, so respect to them. But you may not know that before Dylan became a girl, he had a past life as a performer. He actually starred in a US production of the Book of Mormon, which is no small feat to achieve. It is extremely competitive, especially in the US. There are so many talented people to be cast in a mainstream musical like this. So one can't deny that he is not without some talent, and he did kind of look the role, at least at the time. But this time, he is playing a role originally meant for a female who has a song written for a female register. So I just wonder, is he going to be able to cope with that? And a video like this may help us assess if he will be a success.
But the tigers come at night, with their voices soft as thunder, as they tear your hope apart, as they turn your dreams to shame.
Yeah, I mean, not terrible, to be honest. I think this was during his they-them phase. A little too much vibrato for me, but he can sing. And I know a lot of you are going to say he's terrible or whatever. It's not like he's the best singer you've ever heard, but he can hold a tune, right? Now, I am very curious to see if they change the key of his song in the show, because even though he's a good singer, is he going to be able to sing that song in particular? Because it has some high notes, guys. So let me know when he premieres on Broadway. I'm assuming there's going to be some bootleg of it. I can do a reaction to that on my channel, and although I don't really sing too much anymore, I do understand a little bit about vocal technique, so I can try my best to critique it. But overall, I think it would be quite fun to see whether he really does a good job or not. And before I continue, if you are enjoying this video and you want to see more of my takes about all of our crazy things across culture and politics, I invite you to subscribe to my channel so you do not miss any of my videos. So on Instagram, it's pretty clear that this had pretty big support, right? So it had 129,000 likes. and many, many comments. And some of the comments made me laugh, right? So is Hesketh. Now, we've reacted to him on my channel before in those episodes of Hollyoaks where he plays a trans woman, and we're going to come back to him in a bit. But he said, doing it for the dolls, of course. I really feel like in the last 2 years, the dolls has become even bigger, which is just kind of more of an insult to women, that these men, because of the fake boobs and what they wear and everything, become dolls. Matt Bernstein, of course, was supportive, no effing way. And Charlie Craggs, who is a well-known trans influencer, this one cracked me up. So he said, Anne Boleyn is so transsexual / LGBT coded, honestly. She would be a fag hag for sure and live for this. Congratulations, diva. It's not just that we can cast a trans character. That's one thing, right? You can agree or disagree with that. But it's this rewriting of history, you know, trying to claim that people of history were non-binary, or, oh, this person was so transsexual coded. I mean, what does that even mean, Charlie? That's stupid. And anyway, isn't he supposed to just be playing a woman because he is a woman, not a trans character? It kind of reveals a little bit of what you're saying there. And this Instagram user says, people who says she's stealing a role from a cis woman, do you know how hard it is to train your vocal cords anew after hormones and voice training? How hard it is to sing at a typical female pitch for a trans woman that went through puberty? Male puberty. Getting casted in a musical already required tons of skills, and even more so as a trans woman. Dylan had to work so hard to get here. I'm also so happy to see her glowing despite the harassment she constantly gets. I love her, yada, yada, yada. So this is an interesting comment, right? Because it's a little bit different to the trans sport debate, in which males will nearly always have a significant advantage over women, right? In this case, he's actually at a disadvantage for this specific role because he doesn't have a natural female register. Now, there are some males with great voices who can sing huge-ass girl songs like Beyonce songs, like Defying Gravity, like crazy black woman songs in general. And I just don't know if Dylan is cut out for that. And again, I said I wonder if he's going to change the key. But the hormone thing is debatable because a lot of people have accused Dylan of not being on hormones. He doesn't really look any fuller. I mean, hormones are supposed to increase your fat content, and he still looks very bony and male. He does not really look like the type of trans woman who takes hormones and then has this kind of softening of the face and softening plumpness of the skin. Maybe that's just the way the hormones have reacted with his body in particular. Certainly, I don't think he's had a boob job. He's had the facial feminization surgery, same surgeon as Caitlyn Jenner. Do you think he did a good job? I am quite certain he's not had the surgery. I mean, people wonder if after this grift, if Dylan is just going to get bored of it and go back to being a gay man. And in my opinion, you can say Blair White is a gay man. You know, I agree with that. But Dylan Mulvaney just gives off gay boy energy so much more. Like, it's even hard for me to see him as a trans woman. Now, I tweeted this to Twitter immediately when I saw it, and it went super viral. It has 602,000 views. As you'd assume, the comments on Twitter were less forgiving. But again, some of them really made me laugh. This person redid the poster in AI, which says Dylan Mulvaney, Man Boleyn. Now, I thought that was quite funny. Lauren Chen posted about this, and she also talked about an adaptation where Anne Boleyn has been portrayed as black. There is no part of Western history or culture that progressives will not seek to defile. In a way, I agree with that. You know, the whole musical theater industry, acting industry now, I'm sick of all this race swapping. Like, every time we do anything historic set in a white population of people, white culture, white history, there is this inclination now to always have to make it diverse and cast people of color, whatever, as those roles. And I wouldn't mind this too much if it was done tastefully and it wasn't done all the time, because then you'd go see it and think, oh, that's interesting. My problem with it is the hypocrisy, because you guys know I don't like hypocrisy, and it would never work the other way. A white person would never play an historic black role, and actually if they did, I just think it would be so weird. it just, I'd be like, what am I watching here? And to be fair, historic black roles are often about slavery and oppression and stuff. So it wouldn't work even more for that reason. So I'm not really against the artistic license of race swapping completely, but overall, I think it's super contrived. You wonder whether these people were deserving of the role to begin with, or if they were just a DEI casting. So it's kind of a lose-lose situation for those things now. And there was a lot of jokes referencing Dylan's head, because men technically have two heads, the real head and then the head of the penis, essentially. And there were comments saying off with his head. And you can see one here saying he still has his head. People were wondering, which head are they going to chop off? And this comment from someone called Charlotte Clymer went pretty viral. She said, "You're going to want to sit down for when I tell you who played the roles of women in Shakespeare's time." And to me, this is quite funny, right? Because they're reminiscing on a time when women were not allowed be on stage because it was seen as something women just couldn't do. So men had to play the roles of Juliet in Romeo and Juliet and all of Shakespeare's dramas, which I just think is so weird. Can you imagine how clownish that would have been? So it's not really a win for you, Charlotte, likening it to that, because we're talking about a time when women were oppressed and excluded from a part of society. But can you argue the same thing is happening now? You guys let me know. Now on X, Six got so much hate that they had to put their account on private. And unfortunately, I was not a follower before then, so I couldn't see anything they were posting. But when it's back up, I'll go have a look. Let's move on to the discussion on whether this was right to do or not. Should Dylan Mulvaney have been cast in this role? Well, according to his abilities, we've already discussed that. So let's put that to the side for one moment. Imagine that he was actually the best person skill-wise to play this role. Is this a situation where a man is yet again taking the spot of something that would have been for women? And you may be surprised that my take on this is a little nuanced. Going back to the original production of Six, which was in London, the writers themselves are English. They are Toby Marlowe and Lucy Moss, and you can see that they look quite queer and alternative. I mean, if you call it alternative these days. I thought he was a they then, but apparently he's actually not, so hats off to him. I just want to pause and say, huge achievement for them. They were nominated for a Tony. They have created a musical that has been put all over the globe in a very short space of time. It's been on all the main stages on Broadway, West End, Australia. It's done tours all over the world. It's always on cruise ships. So they must have made a ton of money out of this, and hats off to them for writing such a success. But from the beginning, they were very into the kind of DEI, what you might consider woke casting, because this is reimagination of English royalty from the past, but it is done in a very rock concert kind of way. And it was very purposeful, in my opinion, that they made the cast very racially diverse from the beginning. Now, there's nothing wrong with that, in my opinion, but I tend to kind of keep up to date with some casts that are going on, and when a new cast comes in London and stuff. And I have kind of kept my eyes on Six over the years. And something I notice is that it always has to have a certain proportion of racial diversity. A lot of the time, the white people are actually the minority in the show, which is quite funny. I do question, or in fact, I really know that sometimes people slip through the cracks here who perhaps are not talented enough to do the roles. Now, that's not saying that there haven't been black women in these roles or non-white women who've been absolutely insane, because there definitely have been. But I've also seen some really dodgy singers, and that goes as well, unfortunately, for the whole kind of fat positive style to it too, because sometimes they have white singers who are obese, and granted, a few of them have been great, a few of them have been not. So to me, I just lose trust with the casting process for what could be an amazing show, because I see it as super contrived and deliberate, and I just wonder, how much is this actually about talent? But having said that, when was the world of show business ever just about talent? A lot of the time, it's 80% what you look like, your personality, your vibe, your star quality, and the rest is sometimes talent. So in that way, it's not really any different. But that is definitely one of the things the show is known for, is how obsessed it is about race. And I'm past that now. I don't love to focus on race anymore. I'd rather just go watch talented people. Does it bother me that they do this? Are they offending the history of the United Kingdom? I don't really think so. There's been so many adaptations of history, of royal families, and I think we're at a stage now where these really old things, you can definitely tell them in an artistic way. And that goes for stuff too like Les Mis. I really don't care if an Eponine is Chinese or a Fantine is black. It's kind of a timeless musical. Everyone knows the story. They're not going to think, how was that person French? So sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And if you follow any of the cast of Six online, you know, they are a bunch of wokies, and that just goes for the musical theatre industry in total. And in the London cast, they all have their pronouns on their bios. And one time I went through this, every single one of them was just she, her. So it just feels like a performance for nobody. But with the current cast, I did manage to find a she, they. So it looks like at least it's paying off. But can you imagine if you were an old person who just knew nothing about this? You go to the theater, you know, with your grandkids or something, and you open the program, and then it's 8 women, and every single one says she, her. You would just think, what is that? And the writers themselves of Six kind of have a history of more of this woke stuff. Lucy Moss directed a production of Legally Blonde in London at the Regent's Park Open Air Theatre, in which she made the cast, again, very diverse. So Elle Woods, who you may know, Reese Witherspoon from the movie, she was played by Courtney Bowman, who is a mixed race actress. I actually used to know her. And one of her stooges in the show, which is originally 3 girls, although one of them is black in the musical originally, they cast a man called Isaac Hesketh at the time, who is non-binary, and now he is a woman, and he appeared on Hollyoaks, that person I showed you before. I found an article here where Lucy Moss said, Legally Blonde's message doesn't just apply to privileged white women. She said, the film version has a very specific idea of what sexy and hot and beautiful is, and that's presented in objective terms. And similarly, with us, we present in objective terms what beauty and hotness is, and in our version, it just happens to not be that it's synonymous with whiteness and thinness. So guys, it's always an assault on whiteness, right? The hot, blue-eyed, blonde, skinny girl with big boobs, just like Sydney Sweeney. And again, I have a nuanced take on this, right? Because Courtney Bowman is a fantastically talented actress, and I saw it and I thought she was great. I had a great evening out. It was really fun. And I enjoyed watching that spin on it, to be fair. As for the non-binary character, he was awful. He couldn't sing the notes, and to me, that was a total stunt DEI cast. But again, I just don't like the hypocrisy, because if you go to the West End or Broadway, you have no end of musicals specifically written for people of color. The Color Purple, Tina Turner the musical, The Scottsboro Boys, Memphis. There's so many I'm not even mentioning. So they do not have their slim pick for roles. In fact, when I was in drama school, it was commonly said among all of us that if you're black, you're going to work, even if you're not that talented. And unfortunately, that's true. Like I said, there's many people of color in the industry who are amazingly talented and deserve all the success they have. But then there's also a lot that are just simply shite. And that is just the way our casting is these days. But the narrative among all these people is that black and brown voices still need to be uplifted. So there's a lot of victimhood as a power play, and again, I'm just over that. But did it bother me in itself? Not really. Now, Glamour magazine had a take on this, which is in favor of Dylan Mulvaney. They said, if Dylan Mulvaney's Six casting offends you, maybe theater isn't for you. Sorry, not sorry. And they came under fire, you might remember, a while back when they hosted this Women of the Year Awards, and they had a cover featuring all of these, that's right, men. So they're all males who believe they're women, say they're women, and people found that offensive because there wasn't a single actual female involved in the process. Like, you know, at least give us one, guys. At least give us one female. Glamour said the transphobes are at it again, this time up in arms about Dylan Mulvaney's casting in Six. But let me make one thing abundantly clear. The theatre community does not stand behind this backlash. Because any true thespian knows that theatre is, and always has been, a place for everyone, free of rigid rules about identity, gender, or who is allowed to tell the story. Now, that's just bullshit. Like, as in, who made that rule? And if you're going to make the argument about Shakespeare's time, clearly the theatre hasn't always been a place for everyone. Now, I'm not saying it shouldn't be a place for everyone, but that is just, you know, a self-fulfilling prophecy you've made up and something that people don't necessarily have to agree with. But one thing I do have to agree with Glamour on is that I don't think the theatre community are going to care about this. In fact, I think they're going to be very excited about this. And this is why I think this is going to go differently than the Bud Light version, because this industry in itself is much more amenable to trans ideology and queer this and queer that and pronouns everywhere. And I think the type of people going to see this show are just going to want a night of fun. There's going to be many fans who actually are totally on board with this concept. And there's going to be loads of people who just come along to the show and have no idea and then are like, is that a man? Or maybe Dylan will be so convincing that they won't even know. I'm not sure. But Dylan himself was very happy about this. He wrote on Instagram, "Yay Broadway, so happy my Broadway debut is playing a fellow polarizing woman in this perfect musical next month. I hope you will come watch me live in my dream. I am so happy I can't stop smiling." Well, at least Dylan is happy. And before you hear my final take on whether I think this was the right decision to cast Dylan or not, you know I'm very critical about trans, let's see a video Dylan uploaded today talking about his new role.
It's day 1408 of girlhood, for all those who still celebrate. And today is my
For all those who still celebrate. It's never gonna end.
first day of rehearsal for Six the Musical on Broadway. Woo! I only really make these videos now on special occasions, but I would say today is a pretty big day. And I've got two very important communities in my life, the theater community and the trans community. And when I started this series, I think the general public didn't fully understand theater kid energy. But if you look back at my early videos, I make so much more sense.
Theater kid energy is just staginess, and to be honest now I just find it really cringe and annoying and attention seeking.
When you realize, oh, she's just a cringe theater kid. Got it.
Yes.
But I moved to New York City last week. I'm in an apartment that doesn't have furniture yet, but a woman did walk through that bookcase last night and it really scared me. I think that might be a story for a different video. And I'm wearing my I Love Musicals shirt, and it has a little blood on the back of it, but the front is clean, and that's what matters, right? And it is 1 month till my Broadway debut on February 16th. Oh my God. Before I transitioned, I was in the touring production of the Book of Mormon musical. And actually last week I had this shoe fitting for my Anne Boleyn costume with the same guy who did my Mormon shoes. And he was shocked because I went down an entire shoe size since he fitted me 7 years ago. And most people's feet get bigger over time, but mine have gotten smaller. And I was like, honey, estrogen is an incredible drug. And I've got
I highly doubt that. I mean, Leah Thomas said that his feet had got smaller, but how can your feet get smaller? I mean, your bones are fully formed.
gotten so many lovely messages since this was announced, especially from folks that have followed me since the beginning of my journey. And I just want to thank you so much, and I hope you get to enjoy this as much as I do. And I have also gotten some not so lovely messages, you know, questioning my abilities or just hating in general. And my first instinct was to come on here and try to convince those people that I do have what it takes to be a Broadway performer and to tell you why. But then I realized that I shouldn't waste my breath on that, because this is a miracle. It's a miracle for anyone to make it to Broadway.
I mean, you waste your breath on a lot more. Can you not tell us why?
And there are so many incredible performers that deserve to be, and I genuinely hope that they will. But being a trans person in 2026, when this world is working against us in what feels like every way, for me to be able to step out onto a Broadway stage as Anne Boleyn and perform an iconic historical character's role in a show that is so rooted in celebrating femininity, I think that's a miracle. So miracles are possible, and I know I have a lot of privilege working for me, and I have this platform which no doubt helped me get here, but sometimes we have to take a different route to get where we're supposed to go in life.
Well, Dylan, that's totally true in terms of the route you've taken to your stardom. You've taken a very different route. And hats off to you for working so hard on everything you've done, because whatever it is, it's worked. And it's funny how, you know, he talks about 2026, everything's working against us. You've just been cast in a Broadway musical because you're trans. You were invited to the White House because you're trans. You've made a music video because you're trans. You have millions of followers. Why? Because you say that you're a woman and you offend women in this way. So I just really don't agree with that. I think the Hollywood, the media, it's still all on your side. Now, this is my take, guys, right? Because I had to think about this for a while. So first of all, is it offensive that they've cast any male at all in this role? Well, I think as a baseline, I'm going to say yes, because this is meant to be for women. It's a story about female characters of history. And to say, you know, the kind of concept of trans is misogynistic in itself, really, that a series of stereotypes and long hair and boobs and nails and stuff makes you a woman, which it doesn't, right? And we have a history of men in sports in particular and in awards taking spots that there are only a few of, sometimes one medal, one award from a woman, right? So in that way, I think it's wrong. Now, in the case of Six, there have been so many permutations of this show all over the world. I reckon at this stage, hundreds, if not over 1,000 actresses have been cast in this musical. This musical isn't going anywhere. They're going to churn it out. They're going to keep it going. There's going to be more and more people cast in this. Like I said, it's even all over cruise ships. So if you're a performer and you really want to be in Six, there's probably a way you can get there, right, if you're professionally trained. So for that reason, and because Six already swaps people's races, I sort of feel like this isn't a huge deal because he's going to perform in it for a year. He's then going to be out. They're probably not going to cast another trans person in it. And I think people will forget about it, right? It would be different if there was like a one-woman show on Broadway about Anne Boleyn, and it was the first time it was ever produced. It was highly acclaimed, highly anticipated, and they cast a man to play the character. I think that would be a major issue. But this musical has just been done so many times. You know, it's like if they did it for Les Mis for one character, I think it'd be really cringe. But do I think it's worth being outraged over? No. And I didn't want this video to be like outrage porn because it's very easy for us just to see any trans thing and be like, oh my God, this is them taking things from women once again. And that often is the case, and I often do feel that way. But I think we have to pick our battles, right? Because this is just a kind of silly show. It's going to be a bit cringe. In fact, I'm kind of looking forward to seeing it. But my main criticism is that Dylan only got this part because of his profile, right? I think if they wanted to cast a trans woman in the show, they probably could have found someone not well known, but much more talented, and who could maybe pull off a much more convincing fake woman than he could. So I think just him in itself, I think is cringe. And I think he's just such a controversial figure. And I can't believe that he still has so much support, because even if you're trans and you agree with lots of trans stuff, you could still hate Dylan Mulvaney like people hate Lily Tino, because he has really brought a bad name to that community, and he's put transition in a way, in a light, he's shone a light on it that makes people see that a lot of it is very misogynistic. So everyone, that's my take. Let me know, do you think that this was the wrong decision to cast him in it? Are you outraged by it? And do you think this is another man taking a spot from women? Or do you just, like me, think it's a bit cringe, think that he's not that talented, and not really care overall, because there's going to be a new cast in a year anyway? I'd be very curious to know what you think. And if you want to keep watching this channel and check out another video, then just click here.